Hello YouTube and welcome to the channel. Now then, today's video is very kindly being sponsored by WPL. They have supplied the channel with a kit C54 to assemble for you guys. Not only have they given me a kit C54, they've also got a 2-speed motor and gearbox, but that's for another video. The real reason they wanted me to assemble a kit for you is to demonstrate how the electronics pack that they supply fits into the kit. This isn't the sound kit, this isn't the Res 3, this is the ordinary electronics that you'd probably get in an RTR. But what we're going to do, we're going to make the kit up and we're going to assemble the standard electronics to see what it's like. Obviously all the bits and pieces we're going to be using today are available at the official store. The C54 kit is about 62 quid, which is about $85. The electronics pack is 22 quid, which is about $30. Not 100% sure how much the 2-speed motor and gearbox is, but I'll definitely put a link in the description below, as I will do for all the parts we've used today. Anyway, I've had a quick squint at the instructions, but I think the place to start is going to be the chassis. We're going to make the axles up first, then move on to the chassis. I think put the electronics in and then move on to the body. Anyway, enough waffle, let's crack on. Now before we begin in earnest, I just thought I'd let you know how well this thing was packaged. Long gone are the days where you get a flat box with a few broken bits in. This thing was double boxed, and they really do take a lot of care when they're packaging the items up for dispatch. So as yet, the last few WPLs I've received off them off the official store have arrived in perfect condition. Right, the first job in assembling the chassis is actually to assemble the shocks, because you've got to fit the shocks to the chassis first, otherwise you can't get to the screws when you've put the servo board on. There's only 5 parts to these shocks. There's a body, a top, an eyelet for the bottom of the damper rod, well it's not really a damper rod, and a spring. So they're dead easy to do, so I'll go ahead, assemble all these, and then we'll fit them to the 2 sides of the frame rails. Now the damper rods, I don't know if you can see there, have a little Phillips screw head on the end. This is so you can hold them still. If you put a little screwdriver down the end, you can hold them still as you are screwing on the bottom of the shock eyelet, if you like. Also, I think these new shock absorbers, I think they come with these new softer springs, so the shocks on the newer stuff are a little bit more compliant. Right then, I have jumped the gun a little bit, but only because I wanted to show you why you have to put the shock absorbers on first before you put the servo tray in, etc. Because if you don't put the shocks on first, you can't, or it's very difficult to access the screws to put the shocks on. So that's why you have to attach them to the outside of the frame rail first. Anyway, I've put the servo board in, the motor mount and the rear bracket in the frame, so we've got the 2 halves of the chassis now together. What we'll do now is we'll move on to the rest of the suspension. We've got the axle holders here and our axle tie rods to put on, so I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll make up the axles. Right then, I did actually get that the wrong way around. You have to actually make the axles up first and then attach the axle brackets to the top, otherwise when you're trying to put them in the frame, obviously you can't access these 2 bolts here. So we'll go ahead, make these axles up and go from there. Axles are very straightforward to put together. There's basically 2 halves of the axle. There's a centre shaft in the middle. You just literally press the 2 halves together. There's little tangs on each, like a male and female tang on each half. There you go, clicks into place. Then you just take your bell housing, which contains your drive shaft gear if you like. Make sure you orientate it correctly. You can use these pins as a guide. Push it on. Take your grease that WPL supply, shove a load in the housing on the gear, like so. If you give it a swizz round, make sure it coats that other gear. Put a bit more in, you can never have too much in my opinion. And there we go. Take the gear cover, or sorry, the axle cover, push that on, and then you take these longer screws or pins and you literally screw them in, and that basically keeps both sides of the axle housing, if you like, together, and it also keeps the two halves nicely firmly attached. Then once we screw the two covers together, we can go ahead and put our axle bracket on, and all that does is literally just sits on top like that. Anyway, I'll go ahead and bung some screws in that. Right, then that's both our axles done. Just check to make sure that they revolve smoothly, which they both do. If you haven't already, get yourself an electric screwdriver. I tell you what, this is worth its weight in gold, especially when you're doing bits and pieces like this. Anyway, what we'll do now, we'll attach the axles into the frame using the axle tie rods here. So I'll go ahead and we'll start bolting these on. Right, then I've gone ahead and attached the rear axle into the frame using the tie rods provided. Don't forget there are two different types of tie rods with two sets of different bends, and it does make a difference where you put them. So a little bit of time and effort spent now will save you a little bit of head scratching later on. What I'm going to do is repeat the process now with our front axle here. Right, then that's the front axle in, and I've attached the steering rod as well. What I might do next for the hell of it is just put the wheels on, but it's starting to look something like now. And then what we'll do then is assemble the electronics off of the truck, test them, and then start putting the electronics in. Now, with this being the kit, the tyres supplied are the squashy rubber ones, and I like to super glue them onto the rims to stop them from coming off. But I only tend to do the back face because if you make a mess of it, at least you don't have to look at it, which is normally what happens. So anyway, I'll go ahead, we'll glue these on, and then we'll stick them on the chassis. And there we go, starting to look something like a truck now. Don't worry if you get some bits and pieces left over. This is normal. WPL normally give you a few spares in the box just in case you lose or break something while you're making it. Next up, we're going to have a look at the electronics. What we'll do is have a look at the electronics pack, and let's see what you get inside. So let's open him up. Right, in the electronics pack we get a transmitter. We get battery charger, battery. We get our little circuit board, our little receiver stroke ESC, and looks like we get some stickers and power lead, headlights. I'm not sure what that is. Could be for the motor, yes, could be for the motor, and the power switch. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and we're going to mock the electronics up off the chassis, make sure everything works, and then add them to the chassis. Right then, I've gone ahead and soldered the power wires onto the motor. I was just checking that everything was working, and it is. Now I have had a little bit of a change of heart. I was going to use the original receiver and transmitter that WPL sent me, but instead I've got an old D12 D42 transmitter and receiver board floating around. Now the logic being is that this board is used to power a 260 motor, so I'm wondering what difference it will make powering the 180 that's going to go in the truck. So I'm hoping that this thing is going to give me a bit more go than the stock board. I might be completely wrong, I might be barking up the wrong tree, but we'll soon find out. Also, I've got a function, I've got functions on the transmitter for steering dual rate and throttle dual rate. So whether or not this has a bearing on the crawling ability, let's say, with just using the 180 motor, I thought it might be an interesting change to make. So apologies to WPL, I am still using your transmitter and receiver though, but I promise at some point I might in a future video use the stock transmitter and receiver. But anyway, like I say, had a bit of a change of heart, everything's working, so I'm going to start bunging this lot into the chassis. Okay, that's the electronics in, we've got the motor, the servo, plugged everything in, everything's working, we've got a little drivable chassis, forwards and backwards. Next job is to start on the assembly of the body. I'm not going to stick the board down just yet because I just want to see how much room we've got underneath. Hopefully there's enough space in there to accept all the wires and the board. But we'll get the body unbagged and start assembling. Now I've got all the bits and pieces out for the shell. And I'll tell you what, if there's one criticism you cannot level at WPL, it's the fact that they do make some really nice scale bodies for their RCs. And the detail, I'm quite impressed actually, because if you wanted to, you could paint up the interior because you've got a steering wheel. It looks like there's part of a dash in there. They've also supplied the upgrade kit, so I've got the fancy bumpers and the sort of roll bars that go across. Anyway, I think the first job is to assemble the interior, the glass, etc. into the body. So that's precisely what we're going to do first. Right, then this is where we're at. I've put the interior and the glass in. The roof rack replaces the original roof rails because this has got the accessory kit with it. Also in the accessory kit you get a different grille and a bumper, but we're yet to put that on. There are also several other bits and pieces that replace existing furniture on the bodywork, if you like. There's several bits that are quite difficult to get on. I found the bumper was quite a tight squeeze getting it on at the bottom, but it's got on, so there's no real issue with that. I did wonder what this little tool was in the toolkit, and I think it's like a little spudger for squashing the transfers onto the bodywork with. Also, you get 4 springs with the body. I'm presuming that these are for the suspension, and they might be either softer or slightly harder depending on the weight of the body, but I'll have a look because they look fairly similar to the ones that I've used on the chassis. So anyway, I'll crack on. We'll get the rest of these bits and pieces on this body, and then we'll have a look at these springs. Right then, that is the body completed with the additional accessories. I think you'll agree it looks absolutely fantastic. I mean, they really do make a good job of their bodies, the WPL do. Only 2 gripes I've got really is some of these little transfers are really fiddly to get on. That spudging tool does make it a lot easier though, I will admit. And obviously the body comes with a slightly different rear tyre. It would have been nice to get the same tyre as the chassis, but that's just a minor thing. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is attach that to this and try and hide all these electronics. Oh, before I forget, the springs that were in the body kit, if you like, are a lot softer and a lot more compliant than the ones you get for the chassis. So I've retrofitted them. It's dead easy, just got to pop the tops off and shove them in. So hopefully they'll give us a little bit more of a compliant suspension setup. Right then, that's pretty much our C54 kit complete. Now I'll quickly show you where I put the receiver board. It's underneath that battery tray there. I've hot glued it to the top of the servo cover. I've had to cut a little hole in the battery tray itself to allow the servo connected to poke through, if you like, because on the D12, D42 board it sort of sticks up vertically, so I needed to cut that hole in order to get it to clear. So like I say, that's pretty much our C54 kit complete. The only thing left to do is actually take it out and see what it's like on the trail. then back inside. What did we think of WPL C54 kit? Well, let's go for some good and bad points, shall we? First bad point, it's a little bit top heavy, but to be brutally honest with you, a lot of these little 1/16 trucks, etc., they're exactly the same. MNs are exactly the same. Put some wheel weights in, put some metal axles on, etc., and it'd probably cure it, knock that on the head straight away. Now, the only other bad point I can think of is the fact that the bonnet is, or the hood is, quite tricky to open, but I think this is what this little tool, I thought it was a little spudging tool for the transfers, but I think it might actually to be for levering the bonnet open, because it is quite tricky to get in there. And that's pretty much it for the bad points. I can't really think of anything I don't like about it. Well, let's go for some good points anyway. Nothing broke, nothing fell off while I was out, which I'm very surprised about, seeing as I built it. I think you'll agree that WPL have made a superb job of making this look like a Toyota Land Cruiser. I think they really have done a bang-up job. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. The kit itself was easy to assemble. There were no parts missing. Everything went together well. I really, from that standpoint, from the assembly standpoint of the kit, I haven't got any complaints at all. Considering this thing has only got a 180 motor in it, I really wasn't expecting much, to be honest. But to be truthful, I was pleasantly surprised. It's reasonably capable on sort of light to moderate trail work. Obviously, if you're crawling over rocks and stuff like that, then you'd probably want to get the 2-speed on the go. But seeing as the kit comes with a 180 motor, and coupled with those, I think hopefully made a bit of a difference with fitting a D12 ESC and transmitter. But considering there's only a 180 motor in this, it makes quite a reasonable trail truck. Now, apart from the performance being better than expected, one of the other pleasant surprises was this battery. I mean, it's only 500 milliamp hours, but I kid you not, it lasted about 40 minutes. I mean, I'm walking around with this thing at sort of walking pace, and we're doing the trails, but it did last about 40 minutes. I mean, I was really surprised. I didn't think it'd get 10 minutes out of a little 500 milliamp hour battery like this, but 40 minutes, no word of a lie. Now, WPL do a larger capacity battery, and I think it's about 1200 milliamp hours. I'll put a link in the description. But if you bought one of them with a 180 motor, crikey, you'd be walking around all day with it. Now, one of the best things about owning any WPL is the customizability of it, and the C54 won't be any different. I mean, if you want to change the axles, you get metal versions, you can get different motors, metal drive shafts, you name it. So over a period of time, if you want to customize it, you want to upgrade it, there are literally tons and tons of options out there for this and every other WPL. Right then, conclusion time. Would I recommend WPL C54 kit? And the answer is an emphatic yes. I mean, I went into this thinking that it's got a 180 motor in it. The performance isn't going to be that good. It's not really going to be much cop. But I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't half bad. As a little trail truck for light to moderate use, it made a damn good go of it. And like I say, if you wanted something a bit more serious later on, you could fit a 2-speed, and that would transform it. I mean, put some wheel weights in it, and I think you'd be well away. The kit, like I say, the kit itself took me about 3.5 hours to put together, roughly. There was nothing missing, everything was there. And when I tested it, nothing broke, nothing fell off, so I really haven't got a bad word to say against it. Once again, a big thumbs up to WPL for sponsoring this video and for supplying the channel with a kit C54. If you want any of the products shown in this video, I will leave some affiliate links in the description. If you want to do the channel a massive favour, go ahead and click some and just have a mooch around the WPL official store. Footfall makes a massive difference to this channel and to WPL. As ever on the channel, if you've enjoyed this video and you found it of some use and interest, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you're feeling that way inclined, hit the subscribe button for more similar future content. I think the next thing we'll be doing with our kit C54 is shoehorning this 2-speed motor into it. So stay tuned, and I'll catch you again soon, guys. Thanks for watching.